Welcome back, everybody. This is Joe Astorino, CCIE number 24347, and in today's video lesson we're going to be taking a look at the OSPF Type 4 LSA, also known as an ASBR summary LSA. One of the most misunderstood concepts with OSPF, so hopefully this quick video will clear some of that up for you and solidify some of that knowledge for the real world and for your Cisco certification exams. So let's take a look here at our network topology. Pretty simple setup. We've got router 2, router 5, and router 4 here, and they're all going to be running in OSPF area 0 to get started. And between router 4 and cat 3 we've got a little bit of RIP version 2. And router 4 here is configured for mutual redistribution between RIP and OSPF. So before we get too much into things, let's just do a little verification on our routers. So let's jump over to router 2 and make sure we have an OSPF neighbor. We do have a neighbor relationship with R5. Notice that the neighbor ID here, 5555, that's going to be the router ID of router 5. All the router IDs have been manually set on the OSPF routers to the router number. So if we take a look at show IP protocols on router 2, we can see that our RID is 2.2.2.2. So we do have an adjacency, and like I said, the RIDs are hard set. Note that in OSPF, the router ID is a 32-bit number, okay, but it is not necessarily a routable IP address. It does not have to be. The router ID is not an IP address. It's just a number we use to reference the router. So for example, we saw here I have a neighbor with router 5, but if you look in my routing table, I don't have a route for 5.5.5.5 because this is the router ID, not the IP address. So that's router 2. Let's take a quick look at router 5. We do have both adjacencies up to both router 2 and router 4. Take a quick look at router 4. We do have our adjacency. Make sure we're getting our RIP routes. All that's been pre-configured. Let's jump back over to R2 and make sure we can see that route. So right here, that's the loopback of Catalyst 3. If we go back to our drawing for a second, Cat 3 has that loopback. He's advertising into RIP, and router 4 is redistributing it. Let's make sure we can ping across, and everything looks good there. Okay, so that gives us a basic gist of what we have going on. Now let's talk about a little bit about this Type 4 LSA. Let's talk about the need for it. In this particular case, what's going to happen is router 4, when he redistributes this route, he's going to redistribute that route into OSPF, and it's going to come into OSPF as a Type 5 external LSA. Let's jump over to router 2 and see that. So we'll take a look at the OSPF link state database, and we can see here we've got a couple Type 5 external link states. Here's our loopback. Now if we take a look at that, we drill down into that. So show IP OSPF database external, and let's look at that loopback address. And we can notice a couple important things here. First of all, the advertising router, 4.4.4.4. Now that's the router ID of router 4. So in other words, router 4, since he redistributed it in, he is advertising that route from that router ID. And notice the forward address is set to 0000, meaning that the next hop here for this route, as far as router 2 is concerned, is the router that is the advertising router. So we've got router 4 is the advertising router. If the forward address is all zeros, that means that we want to forward it to the router that advertised it, meaning we want to forward to router 4. Notice that in our database here, we don't actually have any Type 4 LSAs at this point. And the reason is we don't have a need for one. Basically, the Type 4 LSA, what it's going to do is it's going to tell other areas how to get to an ASBR. In this case, let me go back to the diagram. We don't need a Type 4 LSA because everybody in Area 0 already knows how to get to the ASBR. So in other words, when Router 2 gets this LSA, this external LSA, and it sees that the advertising router is 4.4.4.4, Router 2 is then going to look in the link state database, and it's going to see, do I have a LSA to get to that router ID, 4.4.4.4? And if we take a look here, we do. We're going to know about Router 4 already from the router LSA, the Type 1 LSA inside Area 0. So that's really why, in this case, we don't need a Type 4 LSA. Now what we're going to do is we're going to modify things a little here so that things look a little bit more like this. So really the only difference is between Router 2 and Router 5 now, we're going to run Area 25 instead of Area 0. So let's go ahead and make those changes. Let's get rid of this command here. And we'll go ahead and re-add it into Area 25. We're going to do the same thing on Router 5. And let's add it back into Area 25. See our adjacency came up, and we see we're paired back up with Router 2. So now at this point, okay, the game's going to change. Let's go back to our new diagram. Now what's going to happen is Router 4 is going to redistribute the route just like it did before. Okay, when it redistributes and injects that Type 5 LSA into Area 0, what's going to happen is the advertising router RID is still going to be Router 4, 4.4.4.4. Then that external Type 5 LSA is going to go through Area 0. It's going to go into Area 25. The catch is the advertising router ID is not going to change, okay? So when Router 2 gets that Type 5 LSA, he's going to see that the advertising router is 4.4.4.4. The problem is, because now we're in different areas, Router 2 is no longer going to have that Type 1 router LSA for Router 4. Because remember, the Type 1 LSA is only within your own area. So at that point, Router 2 basically is saying, okay, this is being advertised by Router 4, but I don't know how to get to Router 4. And that's where the Type 4 LSA comes in. Router 5, being the ABR here, between Area 25 and Area 0, he is going to go ahead and inject into Area 25 a Type 4 ASBR summary LSA, and it's basically going to tell Router 2 and any other routers that might be in Area 25 later, hey, this is how you get to Router 4. So when Router 2 gets that external LSA and it says advertising router is Router 4, now we know how to actually get to the advertising router, because Router 5 is going to tell us that via the Type 4 LSA. Let's take a look at the real routers here. Jump back over to Router 2. Let's do a quick sanity check. Show IP route. We do see our route. Let's dig into it. Show IP OSPF database. And now we're going to see a slightly different thing here. So this has not changed. We still have our external Type 5 LSA advertising router 4.4.4.4. But notice this section now. Now, this is our Type 4 LSA right here, and it's coming from Router 5. So let's jump into some of these for a second here. Let's look at the external LSA. Now, not much has changed here. Okay, advertising router, still Router 4. Forward address is still going to be Router 4. Difference here now This is our Type 4 LSA here. The difference is that the Type 4 LSA here, this is telling us how to get to router 4. So we can see here that the ABR, router 5, injected this into our area. Okay, and that's going to give us the information that we need to get to router 4. And you know what? That's actually the wrong LSA. I'm looking at a Type 3 summary LSA. I typed the wrong command. So we want to actually show OSPF, show IP OSPF database, and we want ASBR summary. My bad. So taking a look at that, here are the important things to note here. First of all, it's telling us how to get to router 4. That's the link state ID. And who is telling us how to get to router 4? Router 5 is. So as you can see here, the ABR here is actually the one that injects the Type 4 LSA. And we still have our reachability here. Let's jump back to the diagram here for a quick summary. So really what we just saw, router 4 again redistributes the route into OSPF area 0 as a Type 5 external LSA. The advertising router ID is going to be 4.4.4.4. That external LSA jumps into area 25. The advertising router still hasn't changed when router 2 gets it. So it's still 4.4.4.4. Now because router 2 and router 4 are in different areas, router 2 is not going to know how to get to the RID 4.4.4.4 because it will not get the router LSA like it would if they were in the same area. So to fix that problem, the reason the Type 4 LSA exists is to tell router 2 here, how do we get to that advertising router? And that is the job of the ABR here, router 5. So router 5 injects into area 25, that Type 4, and he says, hey, if you need to get to the advertising router 4.4.4.4, you can come through me. And that's basically how the Type 4 LSA here works, guys. Keep in mind, test questions, sometimes people will tell you, you'll read this out on the internet, that the ASBR actually injects the Type 4 LSA. Well, as we've seen here, that's really not true. We can see that the ABR is actually the one responsible for generating that Type 4 LSA. So that's about it here, guys. There's also a blog on this subject over on my blog. Let me bring that up for you. So over on my blog, AstorinoNetworks.com, you can read a text version that's very similar to this. Also, you can follow me over on Twitter at @JAstorino, and of course here, the YouTube channel. Keep following along for more Cisco videos. Talk to you guys soon, and until next time, keep studying hard.